Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week, Mike Bond. He's back from Perth, Australia, the MMA media titan, currently chilling in Southern California. Our old stomping grounds goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in the fight capital, Las Vegas, chilling as well. Nolan King, the Boston shot caller, repping the 617. He's back. Cold coffee's on the ones and twos. Let's get to it. Last week, as we recap the super fight between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski, we also mentioned the accusation by Volkanovski's teammate, Dan Hooker, towards Makhachev and his alleged use of an IV. Since then, we've heard from the different parties involved, including Makhachev himself, who denied using an IV. This discussion kind of carried on throughout the week, and no proof was submitted by Hooker or Team Volkanovski. However, this seemed like a serious enough accusation that it warranted an update, and hopefully will bring closure to what was a great fight between these two pound-for-pound greats. Let's start with the man himself, who was on site covering UFC 284 for MMA Junkie, Mike Bond. Mike, man, what did you think of all this? I mean, you probably were exhausted from the show. Sure didn't need this on your plate.
Yeah, it was a nice little hangover storyline from the event, right? But I think you laid it out pretty well there, George. And I think what you said is critical. There's been no critical or clear or legitimate evidence brought forward to prove that any of these accusations are true. So that's the thing that we just need to kind of repeat over and over. It's just a lot of he said, she said type of stuff. You listen to the interview that Eugene Behrman did with Ariel Helwani a few days after the event talking about it. And he was like, oh, like, you know, we heard kind of something, but it wasn't like, you know, the full story. It wasn't quite enough to go off. It might have even been his teammate, Zubair Tukhugov, who missed weight on that card and was on the first fight of the night. So like they didn't even seem to know whatever information that got shared or leaked to Volkanovski's side. They didn't seem to be overly confident with it, and he didn't seem too happy, Eugene Behrman, that Dan Hooker went out and tweeted those things. He pretty much told them not to, but he said, you know, Dan's his own man, and he decided to go that way, and he was doubling down on it and insisting on it. But when people asked for the receipts, which, you know, he seemed to claim he had, there was nothing brought forward by him. So it almost feels like end of story there. I mean, obviously, you're not allowed to take an IV use of any kind down in Australia under that commission. Maybe the only positive you could say that came out of this was like we learned a little bit more about USADA's protocols and the fact that apparently you are allowed to take up to 100 milligrams of an IV following a weigh-in as long as it's administered by like a legitimate doctor or, you know, you have the right, take the right steps to make it happen. And one of the other things I guess I want to say is there's this photo going around of like Islam Makhachev from Fight Week where he seemed to have, you know, some bruising around his inner arm. And we need to make it clear that that photo was taken on the Wednesday of the fight week when he was doing his pre-fight photo shoot. Go look at the actual photo. It wasn't after the fight. His face would have been banged up. And according to his manager, Rusdan Magomedov, who told me like that was from the photo shoot on the Wednesday where they took a blood sample, the commission, ahead of the fight. So that kind of explains it to me there. You look at the post-fight photo that I took after the press conference where he's standing there. You can't see anything on his arms. So the timeline doesn't make sense to me. The facts don't add up. It's just an accusation that got thrown out there that seemed to really explode. I guess the only thing that you can really say is questionable was that tweet from Ali Abdelaziz that got deleted where he said something about like 3 to 4 liters of use. But I mean, you guys, like, all due respect to Ali and everything, I think maybe pointing to his Twitter as the beacon of insight or legitimacy maybe wouldn't be the most appropriate step. He probably spoke out of turn, and that's why he removed the tweet. But right now, you're going to need to give me something more than just hearsay for me to actually believe and throw heap on Islam Makhachev and then go down the whole road of talking about should this be overturned, should anything like that happen as a result of all this.
Yeah, and to be fair, Volkanovski seems to already be pivoting towards, hey, I just want a rematch in Abu Dhabi. This was such a great fight, goes, and it was kind of marred by this, you know, because we all sat around, like Mike said, waiting for the receipts, waiting to see if something was there, and if it was, then obviously we would opine, you know, about it and how what a poor choice he may have made and the repercussions. And yet here we are now trying to kind of make up for it all due respect to Makhachev, who did have a successful title defense. It's just that it didn't seem to go like as it should. The winner reaps the benefits of a super fight like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mess. I mean, considering how great of an event, how great of a fight it was, it did kind of get marred by that little situation there, which is very strange, because Dan Hooker, he's never really been a guy that you would think would be somebody that would go out and just spout things out of his mouth without any sort of evidence. But yeah, after a couple days go by and you hear nothing to follow up on what he said, it really is kind of a black eye on the whole situation. I think an apology probably is warranted, some kind of statement, because you can't just go on and say these type of things if you don't have the receipts to prove them. I mean, think about if there was any merit to this, like the situation that would create for a fight like this, a situation where a guy moves up in weight, right, to fight for another belt. What a mess we would be left with. It really did kind of have the MMA community going nuts for a couple days, but if everybody's kind of like the way I am and the way I think, after a couple days go by, if you don't hear any evidence, you just kind of see what things are. And that's just Dan Hooker just must have been really pissed off, man. And he has a little bit of a history with Islam Makhachev, but I think the situation might have just gotten the best of him, where I think cooler heads could have prevailed in the situation.
You're right, Goes. We all do move on, but that thing lives on the internet, and not everyone clears him right away. Like, I bet you some people, I already see some people in the chat thinking that it's still ongoing, and we're trying to give you all the information we have. Nolan, share your thoughts on this. I think you also had some stuff to add to differentiate. Like Mike said, we have USADA, which obviously that's the testing body that the UFC uses, but actually in different commissions, I guess they may have some stuff that works with them and outside of them. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Combat Sport Commission of Western Australia gave us and other media outlets a statement about this, saying that they have no evidence that anyone, crossed their rules or WADA rules. So for me, at this point in time, I really don't think that the ball is in Islam Makhachev's court to prove that he's innocent, like that he didn't do something. I think you need, obviously, the other side, the side accusing Dan Hooker and everybody from that team who's brought this up, they need to provide evidence. This isn't, Islam doesn't have to provide evidence he didn't do something that there's no evidence that he did. So really all signs have pointed towards, this being a non-issue. It's kind of unfortunate, with all signs pointing towards there being no evidence that he's had to deal with this. I think kind of in the wake of this whole fight, which was fantastic, I think we can all agree. I do feel like this is just contributing to kind of some disrespect towards Islam. I think a lot of it was unintentional. Like I was on here a couple weeks ago praising Volkanovski, or last week, talking about how great he was. But I don't think there's enough focus on how good Islam did that night. And then to have this come in and kind of mar everything a little bit more, it's just kind of unfortunate. The guy has the biggest win of his career to date, and this is all going on. But there'll always be the trolls. But I think at this point in time, most reasonable people that have followed this story know that until there's evidence provided, there's no sign that he did anything out of the realm of what he was supposed to.
Yeah. And you guys referenced Eugene Berriman. We know Volkanovski's already kind of commented on it as well, and even I believe Joe Lopez. But let's Rizvan, who's also part of the dominance management team as well, Magomedov. But here's a quote from Islam Makhachev. I think it's mostly fair to even talk or give him this. He says, "I don't even want to comment on that. UFC works with an expert organization, USADA. Before and after the fight, I was tested 4 times in total. Somebody posted a picture with the bruise on my vein. Australia has its own commission that takes blood samples during fight week. They took my blood on Wednesday, and I had the UFC photo shoot on Thursday. Some fighters are trying to push this narrative, but the UFC and USADA have no issues with me," he concluded. So there you have it. I think it's now a dead issue. And if something were to come up, we will tackle it then. But for now, congrats, Islam Makhachev. Congrats, Alex Volkanovski. And I can't wait to see part 2. Not right away, right, guys? Part 2 right away, or have you changed your mind a little bit? Anyone?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I'd like to wait a little bit longer. Maybe, hey, get them a title defense or 2 each, and maybe we have a nice main event for UFC 300 brewing sometime next year.
Yeah, let the build come. I missed the days where we really had a year of build for some sort of matchup down the line. I respect the UFC putting on the fights that people want to see, but a little anticipation won't hurt either.
Well, Volkanovski's saying Abu Dhabi, and Abu Dhabi's been happening lately in October. And Volkanovski likes to stay active, so maybe him and Yair can mix it up sometime in June, and then maybe he can get to that. But let me ask you guys this. I think this is a fair question to ask. Makhachev, yes, I know there's going to be 2 months off because of Ramadan, and then about a 2-month recovery. But if my math is right, July, maybe he can fight. There was 2 pay-per-views in July last year. Is it Beneil for you guys? Since we're saying not Volkanovski right away. Connor's not even in USADA. He's the unicorn. He's out of the way. Is there another name? Go ahead. Let's do this, Mike. How about you? Who do you pair up against Mach?
It should be Beneil if everything was fair and this was a meritocracy, but it's not. I mean, if they're going to do Beneil and Charles Oliveira in May, which it seems like both fighters have received a bout agreement for that, I don't know if they've signed them yet, then it just throws it into a wacky timeline, right? Like, Beneil could win and absolutely he would deserve that. But what if he gets injured? What if he can't make that, 6 to 8 week to 9 week turnaround to do that fight? Then you're looking at someone else, maybe Dustin Poirier or Fiziev and Gaethje, who comes out of that could be an option. It just is really going to depend on timing, as these things most often do.
Mm-hmm. Goes?
Yeah, it should absolutely be Beneil Dariush. He has the stats. It's just with everything going on right now, the timing may not work out, but I could see a guy like Dustin Poirier maybe slip in because of something like that. But I don't think his stats outweigh what Beneil Dariush has been able to do.
Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, it should be Benny. The issue I think that's kind of confusing is just with the way the lightweight division is right now. Like, I don't know who you would give Charles Oliveira. Like, a lot of these guys are matched up. Like, literally, there's nobody, I think, besides like Dustin, who he's already fought, that you could really match him up with. So unless he wants to fight like RDA or something weird, kind of off the board.
Makhachev hasn't fought Poirier.
No, I'm talking about Charles.
Charles, okay.
Charles, like, there's nobody else for him to really fight, unless he wants to really reach deep into that division or fight somebody maybe like an RDA that's, got name recognition, but he's fighting backwards in the whatever. But it's a complicated situation. It's all a big puzzle for the matchmakers. But if you in a perfect world, I think Beneil Dariush would be fighting for the title this summer.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll go in that direction. We'll see. All right, real quick, I'm going to go to the chat. And folks, if you have a solid question or comment, I'm going to actually use this as one of our additionals towards the end of the program. If you're a regular watcher of SBC, that's what we do. We go through these topics. And then towards the end, there's some quick rapid fire stuff, and I can get some stuff in here. But let me see some good comments from you guys. Here's a dumb one. Obi-Wan Kenobi, great name though. Islam got beat up by a little guy. The little guy fought well, man. But, I think both guys came at, fought well. And I wouldn't categorize it like that. Batista Royal says, Islam is the king of MMA. I'm not there yet either, pal. I don't think he's number 1 pound for pound. California Love says, we rolling. And how about a shout out to the babysitter of the stars? Let me see if I can get that in there real quick. Designed by Cold Coffee, this shirt. It is in reference to Burt Watson, former UFC site coordinator, now working for Bellator in the same capacity. He is a colleague of ours here on MMA Junkie. And if you subscribe to this fabulous YouTube channel like you should, so you can get all the quality interviews we do, all the coverage that we do, like Mike's stuff in Australia, Nolan and some of the cool stuff that he's done as well, whether it be with Cain Velasquez or catching up with Brandon Ward, the Junkie Radio stuff. You can also check out a franchise called Legend and Legends starring Burt Watson, where he talks to the legends of the sport. Most recently, they dropped one with the Gracies. So check that out. Thank you for reminding me, California Love. And if you guys submit something worthwhile here, then I will get to it towards the end. But we got to move to topic number 2. The Ultimate Fighter 31 kicked off a few days ago here in Las Vegas. The latest installment of the UFC's reality show features coaches Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. And of course, we have more controversy as Coach McGregor was accused of punting fighters who were already in favor of his own fighters. It was initially MMA manager Danny Rubenstein who took to Twitter and was backed up by UFC middleweight Chris Curtis for said allegations. McGregor replied and said he was not guilty of that infraction. At least that's what he told Action. Let's start the interaction. Goes. What's your reaction?
I think that's, a terrible situation. If that is true, you have 2 guys with pretty good reputations. I don't know either one guy to really say crazy things. But this seems like something that we could get down to the bottom of. And if it's true, Conor McGregor, man, that kind of does suck, But is anybody surprised? Conor McGregor can do these types of things. He can make these types of demands. I don't see the UFC doing something like that. and not maybe taking care of that fighter if they were put to the side, maybe hey, we'll see you at Dana White's Contender Series or something of the sorts. But 3 fighters is what I think he said, and that just seems like a lot, man, for anybody to be able to do. I get Conor brings a lot to the show and his history and being able to pull things off that other fighters can't, but that just seems a little too ridiculous, and hopefully it didn't go down that way. But hey, look, I've been doing this show for 16 years, and you see Danny Segura, I kind of said, hey man, I don't ever want to do an SBC with Danny Segura, so we got rid of him. We brought on Nolan King, so you never know what can happen here. But honestly, guys, all jokes aside, I really do hope that it wasn't true, because that these types of situations, like the Ultimate Fighter, Dana White's Contender Series, you see how quickly, look at Jamal Hill, how quickly he rose, right? And now he's got a title belt. This means everything to fighters. To see somebody get their chance taken away just because somebody wants to help out their friends, that would really suck.
Check out Goes flexing. All right, I didn't know you ran the show here when it came to the panel.
Wow.
And you know what? Let me give the guys a little bit more context here. Here's the direct quote from Daniel Rubenstein on Twitter. He said, Ken Cross, Mitch Ramirez, and Brandon Jenkins. I think it's important for us to just put the names involved as well. He says they all got pulled off to make room for 3 of Conor's guys to be on the show. Again, that's him on Twitter. Hasn't taken it down. Sticking to it. Nolan, what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's Conor is Conor, right? Conor has a big pull, and just kind of from my understanding of this whole situation, it seemed like talking to a lot of the people involved with the fighters and whatnot that are going on this show, that many of them felt like when they were showing up there that they were going to be on the show, that they had asked about alternates, and it had been indicated to them that that's not the case, that this is the roster that we're going with, and yada, yada. And so it seemed like when this ended up, I can't speak to Conor bumping people off or not. I don't know in terms of like replacing his teammates with, replacing fighters with his teammates. I can't speak to that outside of the public accusations that are out there from Danny and Chris Curtis and Gilbert Burns. I don't have any knowledge of that. But what I can say is that a lot of these fighters that went there with the indication that they were going to be there for the whole duration and that they were going to be on the show were kind of told, like, once Conor got involved, the path that the producers were following changed. So I don't know exactly what that means, but that's been something that I know has been said to numerous of these guys throughout even the process of them just being out there. I mean, they were supposed to fly out 2 weeks ago, a couple days before the day that they're supposed to fly out. They're told, actually, we're going to push it a week. Then they get out there. Then they wait an extra week with like kind of no notice of when this thing's going to start or what's going on, no interaction. And then it's another day and another day. So I think that there was certainly a monkey wrench thrown in once Conor got involved. I don't know exactly how that all came about, but it really comes down to the UFC giving Conor some leverage and Conor using that leverage against the people that are running the Ultimate Fighter show. And unfortunately for some of those guys, that meant they got the boot. And I mean, we've seen this before, right? There's been, maybe not in the TUF context, but I believe actually Artem Lobov was on Conor's team the last time that he was coach. But we've seen this in the UFC with contract negotiations too. I mean, Nate Diaz has got some of his friends in the UFC. Conor's gotten some of his friends in the UFC. You can look at some others too. I mean, I don't want to call anybody out, but there have been names that, I think have been signed to the UFC when a key training partner happens to be holding the title. So I think that this is something that happens in the context of the UFC roster. Maybe we don't see it as much with the Ultimate Fighter, but it is a pretty brutal situation, and I think it doesn't minimize the impact that certain people were led to believe that something was going to happen, and then it ultimately ended up being that they, prepared for this change in their life the next few weeks, and then they're like, never mind, you're going to go back to your regular life. So kind of a tough hit for those names that you rattled off if they are the ones that were replaced.
Yeah, Mike, we've covered Conor McGregor for a long time. Let me ask you this. I thought part of the flex is owning the flex, but yet he said, no, that wasn't the case. He said maybe one name might be attached, but he kind of earned his way, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but what do you think of all this?
Right. I think Nolan pretty much nailed it too well. I don't have a ton more to add. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with reality television, there's a lot of things that can go on. Things consistently change. We've seen, people have to leave shows for personal reasons, and they have backups in place. And there's just a lot of moving parts there. So unless, these fighters were brought out there and they sign certain contracts that guaranteed them their spots or things like that, and the UFC was in like breach, I guess they're all within their right to be able to make these certain changes. And then, as Nolan alluded to there, when Conor McGregor gets involved, the entire playbook usually goes out the window and they're able to rewrite some things on how they want to do it. But yeah, Conor's response definitely is interesting in that regard, that he was not saying, hey, like, I want my guys here, I'm bringing them in. He basically denied any truth to that. So I do think that is interesting. I mean, if you're Conor McGregor, I think his whole reason for doing this right now, based off some of the headlines we've got around his name in the past year or so, I think this is part of like a bit of a brand recovery process as we go into the UFC return, as we go into the release of the Roadhouse movie later this year. And I don't think he wants one of the very first things in his association with the Ultimate Fighter to be, hey, Conor, is playing favorites and booted guys to do this or that. And he talked about the cuts and used like a famous little Simpsons, scene within his tweet and stuff there. So I think he's trying to have fun with it. I mean, if they gave him the choice, like, do you want this guy or this guy? And one of them's his guys, of course he's going to choose that person. If the consequence is the other person going home, so be it. But I have a little bit of a hard time believing that he came in there, flew all the way to Vegas and said, I'm putting my foot down. Either these guys are coming or find yourself a different coach. I'm heading back home on the PJ to Ireland.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing, man. I noticed this much. He's aged since the last time I saw him. Derek Brunson was poking a little fun at him. I had to look twice. I thought it was Jeremy Renner showing up to coach. But yeah, he definitely looks a little bit older, man. It must be that sun in the Mediterranean on his yacht.
Yeah, he is is he 34 now? I mean, he's been out of the game for a while. We haven't seen him fight in a while, and I'm sure he enjoys his life otherwise.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right. Topic 3, BKFC KnuckleMania 3 took place, this past Friday, and it was one of their biggest shows ever, according to President David Feldman. What were your thoughts on the event, which featured many former and current MMA fighters? We don't know if they've retired. They might go back and forth. Some maybe have sailed into the sunset from MMA. And that includes TUF 1 winner, Diego Sanchez. So, Nolan, you're leading things off. What'd you think of this event, man?
I thought it was great, man. I think it's probably one of the better events that they've put on that's maybe more of the product that they were seeking, like when they first started this, right? Because I think they came in and they did the smart thing that a lot of competitive, high level or whatever you want to call it, kind of mainstream promotions try to do, which is drag names in from elsewhere and kind of make it revolve around them. But I think with this, sure, you still had Diego, you had Greg Hardy, you had Austin Trout, but I think in terms of like having just a solid top to bottom card with the main event between two guys that I think aren't just people that know how to fight. Like these Mike Richmond and Lorenzo Hunt were both, in my opinion, kind of showing that there are skills to bare knuckle boxing, that there is a pretty high level that can be achieved within kind of a niche combat sport there. So hats off to them. I think that was a good main event to kind of showcase a bare knuckle fight between two bare knuckle guys. And then obviously you did have the Trout versus Diego fight, which I definitely didn't agree with the matchmaking or thought process there. But let's be honest, it could have been way worse. I think Diego was competitive. I think that it kind of ended up with the winner that we expected and similar fashion to what we expected. But I think we could have certainly been saddened by that fight had it played out a different way. And then obviously the Greg Hardy thing went viral for them. Charissa Segala's broken ankle went viral for them. So they had a lot of good moments. I think it seemed like a good crowd. They have these nice reoccurring locations that they go to. And now New Mexico is being worked into that too. So I have to give them a thumbs up. I think it was a good product. I think it was worth, if you had $10 to spend for that, like that's way worth it. So good for them to put on a pretty solid top to bottom event. It was one that is kind of their tentpole, the KnuckleMania series. So I think it had to be a success on their end.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Mike? You feeling BKFC after about 5 years in now that they've done their thing, and they've definitely brought in a lot of MMA fighters to try and pique at least us hardcores, us junkies, our interest there, along with some of the world from boxing and some of the ones that I guess they brought up on their own.
Yeah, I think for what it is, like they've done a decent enough job. I think they've ingrained themselves part of like our combat sports expectations and like the schedule that, we covered a decent amount at MMA Junkie. They have names that they've been able to get that, attract attention and clicks and stuff. I don't think, once you get too much of it, I think a little bit of the allure goes away. Like I think watching it, once a month or once every couple months, they get a big enough event that these people tune into. That's what still makes it feel like a little bit special. I mean, I know they're doing shows almost every weekend now in different points of the world, and they're doing stuff in like Thailand and whatnot. So they're definitely growing their brand. I don't necessarily see it doing massive, impact on their outreach or, the numbers or the interests. I think it's always going to be who can they get that's like a notable name and stuff like that. I don't think there's going to be people being like, hey, it's just BKFC this weekend, like a UFC being like, I don't care who's fighting, I'm tuning in for this thing. So I think that's a bit of a problem that, like every other combat sports organization, they're going to have to deal with and navigate through. But for what it is, I think it's okay. But yeah, I mean, I didn't love seeing Diego Sanchez in there getting clobbered once more. I think that matchup didn't make the most sense from the beginning. I understand what they were trying to do, I guess, but I would prefer something a little more even keel and maybe trying to give these guys fights that make, a little more sense given where they're at in their career. I mean, I still think to date, one of their more successful events is like Arda Blowball versus Paulie Malignaggi. And that was just like the perfect recipe for what I think BKFC can work as. But anything beyond that, I can't envision them in 5 years, 10 years getting an ESPN deal or anything like that.
The matchup was certainly nuts when I first heard about it, when they got Malignaggi. The fight didn't deliver, although Lobov's had some other classics. But yeah, they think outside the box. That's what I enjoy about them. How about you guys? Where do you sit with BKFC now?
I thought the card itself delivered. I thought BKFC is doing a decent job of sort of evolving, but at the same time, like what's really interesting to me is the rules aren't so defined just yet, right? You saw a guy like Paulie Malignaggi. It is bare knuckle boxing. You see a veteran boxer come over and not do too well, and that's kind of happened a few times. But then you get a guy like Austin Trout, a very decorated boxer, and he kind of did what we think some of these other boxers should have done, right? The way he fought was very, very reminiscent of how he boxes in boxing. He was able to stay away from Diego Sanchez, stay away from the clinch. When he did get in the clinch, he went to the body. So the rules aren't still defined, like who exactly is going to dominate over there. You get a guy like Greg Hardy, right? Tons of power. He's going to knock someone's block off. It didn't really work out that way. And I think it's kind of that not knowing what's going to happen that keeps people wanting to watch BKFC. I think it's been really cool. And then they did a great job of laying the foundation for future cards, right? Having Luis Palomino there, bringing him in there, having him talk to Austin Trout. It gets you excited to see the next time they come out. They did that really well with Mike Perry, with Ben Rothwell, laying a foundation of what could be coming. They got the ball rolling, man. I thought it was a very, very fun card, very entertaining.
Yeah, and let me point out, Lorenzo Hunt was 3-4 in MMA, and now he's a champ for them, just like Luis Palomino. So he's got a new lease on life, a successful career. And his opponent, Mike Richmond, I saw him in San Diego fight at 135, and he competed on Saturday at 185. So I guess in a way, a shout out to BKFC for maybe seeing this, putting that together. I would have never thought about that. If I'm the promoter of a new organization, I don't know if I'm grabbing subpar 500 fighters from MMA. I mean, unless they really showed me something special and then matching them up against someone who fought 50 pounds lighter. But that was crazy. And that fight was awesome. And I already want to see the immediate rematch. Man, BKFC's kind of pulled me back in, guys. Part 2 to this topic is Diego Sanchez. We all love Diego Sanchez. But, oh, man, okay, so to be fair, I thought he competed well against Kevin Lee. And I thought Austin Trout was going to embarrass him in less than 30 seconds. It took to the 4th round, but he did get, picked apart, right? So I think great execution by Austin Trout. But what do we do with this guy? I guess we can say, hey, it's time to retire. Back to MMA. BKFC, but maybe a different type of a lower level opponent. What do we do here? All right. And we're going to go back to Nolan on this.
Yeah, I'm honestly fine with seeing Diego compete again, but it has to be against the right people, right? I mean, the matchup that happened on Saturday, we've all spoken about this ad nauseum. It was another example of BKFC kind of putting together some irresponsible matchmaking. Sure, like Diego didn't get deaded, he didn't get knocked out, but he got beaten soundly. And bottom line is, to go into a fight that's closer to boxing than MMA with a guy that's a championship boxer when you're kind of on the tail end of your MMA career, I just think that seemed like a losing recipe. But going forward, I really don't have a problem with them booking him. It just has to come against the right people. Diego's shown in recent years, his final UFC fights. I think the Eagle fight against Kevin Lee was a good example. Like, sure, he's not the fighter that he once was, but he also can be competitive. He's changed his game a bit sometimes to kind of to gear it towards the he's changed his game a bit to kind of gear it towards the grappling, I think, a little bit more than we saw earlier on in his career. So I don't have a problem with him fighting, just has to come against the right people.
Mm-hmm. Mike, how about you? What were your thoughts on this? There's different things, I guess, that Diego can do. Where do you sit?
I'm so torn when it comes to Diego Sanchez, man. Like, he's obviously got the heart of a warrior, and he can go in there and he's going to be, the toughest dude till, the day he leaves this earth. It's just insane. He has that grit and mentality built in him. It seemed like there was the point, even a couple of years ago where it's like, okay, the chin's starting to go. Now it's going to go way, way downhill for him. But it seems like he's got a little bit of that, durability back and stuff, and that maybe he can still be competitive through his toughness alone. But at what point do we draw the line on that? And I'm not sitting here advocating for him to retire tomorrow or anything, but like, how many more of these do we want to see? What is the right time for him? We give him one more of these, two more of these, and he goes, 1-1, or maybe 2-0 or 0-2 or something. Like, what are we ultimately working towards if you're Diego Sanchez? And my biggest fear for him is for the Ultimate Fighter 1, the guy who was a face of the sport, one of the critical pieces in the evolution of the sport and getting it to where it is now. Is he having to fight because he loves it still, or is this because of he needs the money as well? And if it's because he needs the money, that is a really sad conversation that we're going to have to sit here and have, because this is a guy, for the pay-per-views he's headlined, the dozen fight of the night bonuses, all these things that you could go on and on about, and for what he's done for the sport, he should not have to worry about money for himself, for his children, for his grandchildren. Like, this is one of the examples of someone who's done so much, and he shouldn't have to be fighting because he financially needs to. And if he wants to keep doing it out of the passion, and he wants to take the health risks that are potentially going to come along with that, who are we to sit here and say that he can't or he shouldn't? And if commissions are willing to license him, okay, I guess so. But for me, I'd just like to have a conversation with him and know what his drive is and what he wants the end to look like. What is he trying to do with this latter stage of his career, whether it's in BKFC or going back to MMA? And I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable kind of discussing this and what the exit point is for him. But that's my ultimate concern. I know I see some people in the chat mentioning, he was maybe cheated to a degree in this fight, and he put out the statement, saying that he thinks Austin Trout was greasing and stuff like that. I mean, if you watch that fight and think that Diego getting a couple, short range punches in from the clinch would have made the difference in his favor, I'm sorry to tell you, it would not, most likely. He was getting pieced up bad by that jab, and I think it just is what it is. I mean, all the blood alone probably would have made it just as slippery as any Vaseline on his neck. So I guess we'll say that on that.
Yeah, it's Chase Chambers in the chat who's saying something fishy went on with Trout. All right, how about you guys? What are your thoughts here, man? The R word, UFC, another MMA promotion, BKFC again. What?
Not BKFC again. I don't think I want to see that happen again. But as the other guy said, he has been competitive in mixed martial arts. Rest is definitely the first thing. Trying to figure out that end game is very, very important, because how many times we sit here and you see these fighters that have these problems later on in their lives. You don't know when that's going to happen, and you don't want to wait for it to happen to say, okay, now it's time to walk away. That's not how it works. You want to beat it. You want to get in front of it. And so I think that might be the time for Diego. Definitely a lot of rest. If he does come back, mixed martial arts, and he's done so much for the Ultimate Fighting Championship that I would like it to be one last fight in the Ultimate Fighting Championship against the right opponent, though, right? Not an up and comer. Let's not use him to put someone over. Give him somebody else that's kind of on the same timeline. He has a win over Jim Miller. How about UFC 300? Put those two together, something along those lines. But no more BKFC for Diego Sanchez. No more boxing. None of that.
That's a good one. I was going to say Matt Brown, if he hadn't been locked up against Court McGee, he's got Court McGee coming up. But just someone like same age.
You want to see Matt Brown elbow his skull in again, George? We already saw that.
But true. But let's see him deal with Diego's ground game. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be shocked though if they did that. The UFC does not clearly do that type of thing, right? Like, I remember even asking Dana White about Eddie Alvarez potentially coming back in November when he was beating that drum, and he even was like, we don't really do this. And you could make an argument Eddie Alvarez is much more competitive in 2023 than Diego Sanchez would be with some of the UFC lightweights or welterweights. So it sounds nice, and obviously that would be awesome to see them do something like that, but I'd be very surprised if they went that direction.
He's got a soft spot for that season one, man. He's got a soft spot for those guys. I think he could get talked into it.
Does he?
Yeah.
And maybe he can be a body snatcher on Slap Fight. Forrest Griffin.
All right, Nolan, you wanted to say something?
No, I was going to say they also had the opportunity, I think, recently with Machida, was kind of campaigning for that Shogun fight in Brazil, like a one-off. And they, we ended up having the sad image of Ihor Pateria instead. But I was going to say one more thing about Diego that I think people don't necessarily understand is, like, you can make obviously the argument about promotions having like a moral obligation to not book certain fights, but I will say when it comes to a lot of these things with specifically with this situation, like, this was the commission, like Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship did what they had to do and went above and beyond to get Diego extra medical clearance for this fight. But when it came time, the commission, was split and ruled for him to fight again. So it's going to be an interesting debate. I think we're going to see going forward as MMA progresses, these guys that pile up a lot of fights and maybe have obtained a ton of damage or have a bunch of losses in a row, how the commissions handle them. I think a lot of the commissions feel like they don't have, if there's no, specs on the brain scan and the guy is answering all the right questions and says that he feels fine and he's good to go, that a lot of them feel like they don't have a basis to prevent people from fighting, that they could go, get sued essentially from preventing somebody from making a living. So I think that this debate of how a commission steps in and stops somebody from fighting will be something that's very interesting to see how that plays out in the next couple of years. If any of these commissions kind of have a more extended protocol than just, hey, if your scans all show up good, you can fight, even though you've been knocked out a bunch and had some tough fights. So something to keep an eye on going forward.
If the Muppet Show ever comes back, I think they could make Muppets out of some of these commissions because they need to learn from their predecessors, guys. James Toney, did he look like he belonged in there against Randy Couture? I mean, not for a minute. Did Conor McGregor look like he could box with Floyd Mayweather, And for them to think that Diego Sanchez could box with Austin Trout, I realize one guy's coming from this sport, one guy's coming from this sport. Let's put them in there together. They're both in their upper 30s, that you can get away with it that way. But this was going to be contested on the hands. In no way was this ever really going to be competitive. Can they pass scans, answer questions? Sure, but there's got to be something to be said for, putting two people in combat and it being, an even keel thing. Like, I don't know that. Maybe we have Ray Mercer to blame because he knocked out Tim Sylvia in our sport. I don't know what it is, but somehow they can pull it off. And I don't know if it's, I don't know. I don't even want to say it, why they may get convinced to do these things, but there's just good ways to have fighters exit these sports. And I think you could put them in there against another veteran. Mike's right. I mean, most of the time it doesn't look like they want to do that, but damn it, like they wanted to give Nate to Khamzat Chimaev, right? They wanted him to get served up. That fell apart. Next thing you know, we had a fight between Tony. But guess what? I think we all felt pretty good afterwards. Tony was respectful. Nate was respectful. The arena applauded. Even old Dana White was sitting there going, hey, we wish Nate the best. We have to learn from that and apply it going forward.
Yeah. I mean, what's so wrong with – I saw the Matt Brown, Court McGee fight book the other day. Like, that's perfect. Like, why don't we do that sort of stuff more? What's so wrong about – not having both of these guys fight 2-0 guys off Contender Series. So
that's who the winner gets to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your reward.
And the loser. But no, I mean, totally. I just think matchmaking needs to be under the microscope a little bit more when it comes to fighters that have taken, whether it's, a lot of damage in a few amount of fights or just an extended amount of damage over their career, regardless of how successful they've been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. Good stuff. Let's go to topic 4 here. Erin Blanchfield took out Jessica Andrade at UFC Fight Night 219. What did you think of her performance? Is she ready for a champion like Valentina Shevchenko, provided she gets past Alexa Grasso coming up here in a few weeks? UFC 285. Goes and I will be hosting a watch along. All right, Mike, it's back on you.
Yeah, I thought she looked great. I mean, I don't know how you could watch that performance and come away with pretty much anything but rave reviews for Erin Blanchfield, right? Like, we thought maybe her biggest disadvantage would be on the feet in this fight. Jessica Andrade is, nothing short of a hitter, and she's been in there with some of the absolute best across 3 weight classes in the UFC. And Blanchfield definitely went out there and surprised her a little bit, maybe showed, a little bit of defensive vulnerability, but, she's young. She hasn't taken a whole lot of damage. She's got some opportunities to go in there and step toe to toe. I wouldn't advise her to do that every fight for the next 10 years or something, because that's when things start to add up. But for a fight like this, I think it worked out in her favor. Obviously, she was able to, mix up Andrade's mind a little bit. And then when she found the opportunity to get to the ground, she pounced and finished the job in a matter of seconds. So A+ performance, in my opinion. Can't really ask for much better besides going out there and knocking your opponent out in 15 seconds with the first punch. So of course it has to be noted, Andrade, undersized for this weight class despite fighting for the belt, took this fight on a week's notice, maybe even a little bit less. So those are things, but Andrade is always ready. She's the one who always says, I want these short notice fights. She has the most fights in women's UFC history, 23, for a reason. It's because she's always prepared to compete in situations like this. And if you look at what she just did to Lauren Murphy, another former title contender in this division, and then compare it to what Blanchfield just did to her, I think that even heightens the performance even more. So she is the real deal, 23 years old, a viable option to potentially break the record for youngest female champion in UFC history, which is currently Rose Namajunas' record, around 25 years and 6 months or so. So I think she can get it done. It just depends. How quickly do you want to do it? Do you want to put her in the title shot right now and have her fight the winner of Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso, which is less than 2 weeks away? So the timing is pretty sweet. We know Shevchenko likes to be an active champion. I don't know what their plans would be if Grasso pulls the upset. You would have to imagine Shevchenko would get that immediate rematch. She's obviously more than worthy, unless she wants to, dip up to 135 or something. She's clearly got the resume for that immediate rematch. So I suspect they would go that way. And that would have to be Blanchfield fighting someone else in the meantime, which she said she'd be open to doing. So they have pretty much all options with her. Let's wait 13, 12 days, whatever it is, until UFC 285. And then we can really firm up plans going forward. But right now, I don't think anyone's going to sit here and complain if they decide to give her the title shot next. Will she beat Valentina Shevchenko? I don't know. If you base it solely off the performance last time against Tyler Santos and look at Blanchfield's strengths, I think maybe you could make an argument. There's certainly an opportunity for her to win there, but maybe Shevchenko comes out and lights the world on fire against Grasso, and we all think she's untouchable again. You never know. But right now, a fight between Blanchfield and Shevchenko, I think, would be one of the bigger and more compelling title fights in women's flyweight history.
All right, goes. If Valentina were to get past Alexa Grasso, is Blanchfield ready? Is now her time?
I think now is her time. Is she ready? That's a difficult question to answer because it was, back-to-back top-notch performances from her, but she did get touched by Jessica Andrade. Jessica's striking's a little bit more wild, and she took the punches. She's got a chin. Valentina's a little bit more pinpoint. And remember, Jessica doesn't really throw too many kicks out there. That's something that gets incorporated in Valentina's arsenal. So there would be a little bit more to look out for. I think she's ready for a fight like that. But, if she had one more fight, I think the experience is what would really, really help her. But it's a fight that if you sign it today, I am all in. That would be a very, very fun fight to watch. Where I do want to give Erin Blanchfield credit is it just seems like anytime you put any type of challenge in front of her, she makes the adjustments. And, like in this fight, right? When things weren't going her way, sometimes in the striking, she went to her bread and butter. She's got really good fight IQ. And with the improvements that she makes from fight to fight, yeah, I think she could really give Valentina Shevchenko a run for her money if she does get past Alexa Grasso.
Man, looking back, great job again, Cold Coffee, with the B-roll, but she got tagged. She took some of Andrade's best shots. And to compliment, knowing she's got a chin and she's developing a striking game, and then the compliment with the ground game. Why I'm getting excited at the prospect of her fighting for the title. All right, how about you, Nolan?
Yeah, it's bottom line is it's exciting for this division in particular. I think that if you look at women's MMA as a whole, I mean, outside of Ronda Rousey, I can't think of a fighter whose stock has so quickly risen in the span of a few months. I think she is exactly what this division needed. It seems like this division's kind of had a lot of the same faces. Now we're starting to see Manon Fiorot, Erin Blanchfield, Talia Santos. This is great for the division. It's getting healthier. Alexa Grasso, so for me, I think she looked great. Her striking defense has always been, in my opinion, her biggest issue. If you look at the fights against Sarah Alpar, if you look at the fight against JJ Aldrich, To me, that showed that she is still hittable. But I think she continues to get better and better. And I mean, if she's going out there against somebody like Jessica Andrade and she's showing these big strides that we haven't seen, or we just at least haven't been exposed to before, just because some of her fights have been quick, that's a really good sign that somebody at this level is still improving this much at 23 years old. I think she's somebody that could, even if she doesn't, if she doesn't win against the winner of Valentina versus Alexa Grasso, which I think should be her next fight, so what? Like, she's going to take a step back and she's probably going to fight for the title again, just judging by how much better she's getting each fight in her age. So I think that this is a a win-win situation for her if she goes into this title fight against the winner of Grasso versus Shevchenko. I think she's earned it. The UFC seems to be thrilled with what she's doing. It's not very often that you have a star kind of emerge in this division, a budding star. So I think you got to book it. I think it's intriguing stylistically. The fans are into it. And for that division, I think that's more than enough to qualify her for a title shot.
Mm-hmm. Guys, let me
think people, just to add real quick, George, I think, like, I see people in the comments talking about Fiorot should be next and stuff. I think for the resume with her win over Caitlin Chukagian, probably the most deserving contender, but she's injured right now. Farah Hanoun did an interview with her for MMA for MMA Junkie just a few weeks ago or whatever it was. And she's probably not going to be ready till late summer, maybe a little bit further beyond. So, and for her, maybe coming back after a year layoff and fighting for the belt right away, maybe not the best call. You get a win in there, something like that. So these things largely all come down to timing and stuff like that. So everyone needs to keep those things in mind as well. Of course, Fiorot is in the mix. We're not forgetting about her, but she's injured right now, so she's unavailable. So that's probably why we're not having her at the tip of her tongue of who should be next to fight the winner of Grasso and Shevchenko.
And I heard even that was the fight the UFC was hoping for next was Shevchenko versus Fiorot.
Yeah,
so
we'd be seeing that in 2 weeks if that was their perfect world.
Right. She's close, but again, it's all about timing. Like, that's why Alexa Grasso is fighting for the belt right now.
Yeah. And and you guys named off all those young fighters, Talia Santos, Blanchfield, Grasso. Let's not forget Tracy Cortez, I think is 10-1. Casey O'Neill's, I think, 9-0. And then throw in the veterans of the gatekeeper, what's her name again? Caitlin Chukagian, Lucky, Lauren Murphy, Jessica Andrade. Guys, is the flyweight division the marquee division in women's MMA now? It was the last one to get installed by the UFC. We're going to leave featherweight alone. But has it maybe taken that over from strawweight?
I think so. I think it's starting to get there because of all the fresh matchups that we can provide here.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Rose will be competing there as well going forward. So this is a really healthy division right now. And again, like I said, I think sometimes with just the dominance of the women's division's champions, with the exception of strawweight, so like flyweight and bantamweight, it's just kind of become monotonous to a certain degree. So even if Valentina goes out there and she beats everybody that we just named, like, I think that's more tremendous to her stock than if she was fighting, the number kind of moving down, right? Number 8, this is good for this division.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go to topic number 5 here. One on Prime Video 7, Bellator 291, and UFC Fight Night 220 will all take place this weekend. Which promotion can boast having the biggest fight to look forward to? Doesn't have to mean like the stakes are the highest because of this or because of that. It's what you guys personally want. That's what I want to know. Go.
Look, a fight that I'm looking forward to is Tatiana Suarez and Montana De La Rosa because it's been a minute since we've seen Suarez, right? We haven't seen her fight in a while, and she has that skill set, that power that can kind of provide problems for champions. Now, remember, she can do this in 2 weight classes too, so a lot can come from this fight. I think it's going to be a competitive fight, but I really want to see where she's at in her game, and if she can stay healthy, her presence alone, man, I think that could really shake things up for that division. I think it's going to be a fun fight to watch. And like you said, every promotion is kind of bringing a little bit something here, but I just like being able to revisit having her name out there because I think when she's on, man, she's a really, really tough fighter.
How about you, Nolan? What's your pick?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Bellator 291, the main event. I think Storley versus Amosov is kind of an interesting fight for a number of different reasons. One is that it's in Dublin, which we all know has some of the best MMA fans in the world, if not the best MMA fans, just really bringing that environment every time. But it's also got the storyline of not only a title unification bout, but also Yaroslav Amosov coming back from the war in Ukraine. I think that's a big storyline. He's one of the best fighters pound for pound in Bellator, one of the guys that I think if he made the jump to the UFC, you can make the argument that he would maybe beat everybody there. So I think it's a pretty solid main event. These guys have fought once before. It was kind of a grueling match, and now they get to do it over 5 rounds. So in Dublin, I dig that fight, and it's just exciting to see Amosov back after some uncertain times away. You know,
Mike, what's yours?
Yeah, Nolan giving us a little preview of what I'm sure Scott Coker will say many times this week, and that Amosov is the best welterweight in the world and would beat everyone in the UFC.
I didn't mention that I have to go back to my desk and talk to my guys, Mike Hogan, about matchmaking going forward. So
yeah, no, I feel you. But anyways, I think I guess round it out here and give a little respect to all sides. I am looking forward to the one championship fight between John Lineker and Fabricio Andrade. I mean, the rematch of a fight that ended in a low blow. So we get a little bit of beef there, I guess, to a degree, and just kind of get some resolution to that. And John Lineker, he's been absent from the UFC for several years now, but still one of the great action fighters in the sport and one of certainly the best fighters outside the UFC period. So he is worth your time if you got the Amazon Prime subscription and want to see some violence. I think one championship will deliver in that regard. But I think if we're highlighting the violence fight of the weekend, it is the UFC's main event between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. I mean, what is the over-under on this thing going? Like 60 seconds, 90 seconds? Those two are just going to go in there and absolutely try to take each other's head off from the opening bell. I think something like over 30 first round finishes between the two of them, and like a combined 93-94% finishing rate over the course of their career. So do not blink when that one comes down. And I guess we'll see if Ryan Spann can continue a streak of success without training for MMA like he claimed he did.
Yeah, true. And Krylov should not sleep on Spann's submission skills, man. Otherwise, he'll be asleep. But yeah, no, seriously, these guys
they can both lose in every single way, probably except for by decision.
I would agree. Great shout out to Lineker, man. He's Hands of Stone too, right? Isn't that one of his nicknames or something like that?
Yeah, it's Hands of Stone.
Dude,
I was thinking Hands of Steel for a second there, but it's Hands of
125, 135. He's held it together, man. His fights are pretty exciting. So that the one championship fight on Amazon Prime, that one should be a good one too. Chase Chambers said Neal versus Rachmaninoff, but I believe that's on the pay-per-view the following week, right, guys?
Yeah, that's next week.
Yeah, all right. You got to pay attention
to
this question.
Still worth paying attention to. That card is insanely deep. It's better than everything this weekend combined times 5.
For sure. All right, guys. Let's go to the additional stuff here. We'll be kind of quick here. At BKFC KnuckleMania 3, after their co-main event, winner Austin Trout was greeted in the ring by BKFC champ Luis Palomino. He's champ at 55 and 65. Is this a possible biggest fight in BKFC history that's brewing in front of our eyes? And what's your early lean? Nolan, you like this one?
Yeah, it's a good one. Again, this is the sort of stuff that BKFC should be doing. It's a fun crossover fight between two qualified guys that you could make an argument that either one would win. Part of me leans towards Palomino just because of his status probably right now as being the best bare knuckle fighter in modern history, since the sport was sanctioned in the United States. So part of me wants to lean towards him, but part of me thinks like Austin Trout, man, just having that level of high level boxing, maybe it's not the same as bare knuckle, but I'm going to lean towards Trout. I just think I'm just going to give him the edge just because of what the great things he achieved in the gloved version, what those were.
He was a proper champion at 154 pounds in boxing for sure. He got in there with Canelo Alvarez, some of the top guys in boxing during his time, which he's not done yet with that career, by the way. But all right, Mike, what do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, I think it would be great. Definitely agree with Nolan there. Like on paper, this is one of the best fights BKFC can do in terms of name value. They rely, I think, heavily on the coverage of like the MMA media and the watching of the MMA fan. And I don't know if this one quite hits the barometer of what they'll rush out of their way to see, but for like what BKFC could do within the confines of like their sport and their history, what Luis Palomino has done, this is a big time fight for them for sure. And I think Palomino, what he's shown in there, he can execute the things in terms of using MMA tactics like the clinch and the BKFC rules to his advantage. All the things that Diego Sanchez was saying he would do and could do, I think he's actually much more capable of doing, just given where he's at in his career and his experience over there. So it makes it a much more compelling fight. But what we saw of Austin Trout in there, I mean, he's going to be a tough one to beat in that sport. I mean, once he gets working behind that jab, you're going to be in big time trouble. I think a lot of people out there. So definitely going to be a fascinating matchup. If BKFC can book it, it will be great for them. It's one of those ones that can say, hey, we're not plucking the ex-MMA fighter away and bringing them in and using them just to use their name value to boost these fights. This is a good fight for what BKFC is, given, you know, how the sport has evolved and the history it's created. So hopefully they can get it done.
Very well put. All right, how about you guys? This could be their biggest, huh?
I think it could be. And really, one thing that you have to look at is, you know, BKFC is not going to have this long, decorated history. You're not going to have guys that have 20 fights or anything. But this is kind of the first time where you have a guy in Luis Palomino that sort of represents BKFC. He doesn't no longer so much represent mixed martial artists getting into BKFC. And it's that type of fight where you can have boxing versus BKFC. I think that's kind of a big turning point here for that organization, and Luis Palomino is the guy for that. So you see Austin Trout, you see how well he performed in that fight. That's what we've always wanted a boxer to look like in that type of fight. And then you see Luis Palomino, he brings that aggression from mixed martial arts, but he does kind of tailor that over for BKFC. So it's a really, really interesting matchup. And I think he can pull the dog out in this one, man. I think Luis Palomino can get nasty, like Mike said, where Diego Sanchez was trying to do. I think those are things that Luis Palomino can do and give Austin Trout some problems. So we'll see. It seems like we might see this one a little sooner than we think.
Yeah, he's pointing for April possibly. Yeah, and higher level skills and experience in that sport. So I think Palomino versus Trout will definitely be more competitive. All right, I promised a couple quick comments or questions if we had time. We have just a minute or two, so we'll make it quick, see if I can get one to each one of you. Mike Bond, DJ Theory says, if Leon Edwards loses, they need to then match up Edwards versus Wonder Boy, which would be a great fan favorite fight. Do you agree?
No, I don't think Wonder Boy is in the mix for a title shot right now. I think if Edwards wins, you're probably going to see like a Khamzat Chimaev, Jorge Masvidal if he wins, or maybe even they could go down the Usman route again, depending on how it unfolds.
Yeah, or Bilal Muhammad too.
I forgot to remember the name on that one. My bad, Bilal.
For Nolan, Chase Chambers says, Juan Kenobi says, Islam versus Hamza at 170 would be fun. Yeah, it would be, but do you realistically see that? I think they'd have to be champ situation, right, Nolan?
I'm not trying to shoot down all our commenters' ideas here, but no, I don't think that's something that's in the cards. I mean, a lot would have to unfold. That would probably have to be some sort of super fight, which would mean Khamzat has to win the belt at the same time that Makhachev continues to maintain his belt. So I'm going to say we don't see that. I would love to see it. I think that would be fun, but no, I don't think we're going to see it.
They're saying Valentina body kicks would be trouble for Blanchfield. Boy, I was thinking more of that head kick that she delivered to Jessica Eye. But yeah, what do you think? She could maybe chop her down with some body kicks. You think they'd be effective?
Yeah, that's the one thing that I would look out in that matchup for is, she's going to be throwing attacks from different angles, and that's something that's going to be tough to defend. And that's what happens. She goes low, but that's how she sets up that high kick, right? You saw what happened to Jessica Eye. So it's definitely something Blanchfield needs to look out for. But she's a smart fighter. I think she'd go to her bread and butter and try and make Valentina defend some of that wrestling.
And let's not forget, I bet you all of us said this. If Pena gets the fight to the ground, Valentina could be in some trouble. Valentina, next thing we know, is submitting Pena. So let's not discount. Let's just not say that Blanchfield all day on the ground. That's what has made Valentina one of the great ones out there. All right. Shout out again to Cold Coffee on the ones and twos. Great job there with the B-roll. Kamikaze with the thumbnail. And whoever our photographer was at BKFC, that might be one of the greatest combat sports pictures I've ever seen. When Austin Trout's landing that left and he's hitting Diego, you can see his hair and the blood. I don't know. He was showing it over and over. But yeah, that's an outstanding picture, man. I hate that our guy that's an outstanding one too. But I hate that our guy's on the receiving end of that one. But yeah, that's pretty epic, man. We got to get out of here, folks. Count on us every Monday, spinning Back Clique here live Mondays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Tell all your friends, subscribe to the channel. You'll love it. And give a shout out again to Burt Watson, legend of legends. Start right now with that franchise. We're out of here. Go out and be a champion.